U.S. Secretary of State Dean Acheson once said, if the best minds in the world had set out to find the worst possible location in the world to fight a war, the unanimous choice would have been Korea. The Korean War was incredibly brutal and vicious. In the span of only 3 years, 3 million people lost their lives. And contrary to popular belief that the South was made up of the United States and South Korea facing off against North Korea and the Soviet Union, as well as forces from Communist China, the South was actually made up of the United Nations, with combat units on the ground represented by units from Australia, Belgium, Canada, France, the Philippines, Colombia, Ethiopia, Greece, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, New Zealand, South Africa, Thailand, Turkey. It truly was a coalition of the world against communist aggression. A good friend forwarded me a video on YouTube from a man named Christopher Stefanick at reallifecatholic.com, and it was about Father Emil Kapaun, a U.S. Army chaplain that served in the Korean War. I had to find out more. My journey led me to a Michigan masterpiece, a Catholic church called Saint Francois de Sales, or just St. Francis to the locals. Father Emil Kapaun was a Roman Catholic priest and a chaplain in the United States Army during the Korean War. He grew up in rural Kansas and became a pastor at the same church that his parents got married in. At the end of World War II, he decided to become a chaplain, and he found himself in 1950 in Korea. He was beloved by his men, whom he called my boys. And you could always find him where the fighting was the thickest, at the front, where he'd be giving mass on the hood of his Jeep, comforting the dying, rescuing the wounded. On November 1st, 1950, Communist Chinese forces viciously attacked U.S. elements near Unsan. Father Kapaun calmly walked through withering enemy fire to comfort his boys and rescue friendly wounded in no man's land. About to be overrun by Communist Chinese forces, the U.S. had given the order to evacuate. But Father Kapaun refused and decided to stay behind with the wounded. As the Communists overran his position, he noticed a Chinese soldier ready to execute Sergeant First Class Herbert Miller. Father Kapaun ran over, pushed aside the Communist soldier, and put himself between Sergeant Miller and the enemy. The enemy was so shocked that he just stood there, unable to execute either man, and instead took them prisoner of war. A death march ensued. Anybody who was left behind was executed on the spot. As a prisoner of war, he was cherished by his men. The communists hated him because he kept morale high. He gave away his own food. He would sneak in dysentery drugs to give to his men. He dug latrines. In March of 1951, he developed a blood clot in his leg. He was also suffering from dysentery and pneumonia. And even in his weakened state, he was able to give Mass on Easter Sunday. Shortly after, the Communist Chinese decided to take him and put him into a hospital, which was really just something they called a death house, a place they put people to let them die and forget about them. And the men were pleading, please don't take away our priest. And he said, boys, I'm going where I've always wanted to go. And when I get there, I'll pray for you. And the last thing that anybody sees is Father Kapaun blessing the men who are walking him to his death. Father Kapaun received the Medal of Honor posthumously in 2013. At the ceremony, 9 of the men that he had saved were present, including Sergeant Herbert Miller. Father Kapaun is the highest decorated chaplain in U.S. military history.
They call the Korean War the Forgotten War. But I promise you, it's not forgotten by the Korean War veterans. While life back home in the States was progressing somewhat normally, on the other side of the world, heroes were being made. On July 26, 1948, President Truman signed Executive Order 9981, effectively integrating the military, which makes the Korean War the first war in which black soldiers fought alongside white soldiers. Damned is the nation that forgets its war heroes. It's veterans that have made sacrifices. Let's not forget Father Kapaun and those veterans of the forgotten war. Pray for us, Father Kapaun. Pray for a strong and just America. Pray for a future where our children honor the past.